Whenever you're feeling a little bit blah or a little bit down or you have a case of malaise, build a model. Don't go away. So, when I built my first ever model, I was at home with walking pneumonia, and my dad bought me a model kit. Never built one before, and I loved it. I loved every bit of it. Okay, no paint, straight out of the box, just everything was white, and I had a blast. Okay, despite how bad I felt pretty bad. So yeah, models have a almost magical way of making you feel better. And hey, not that I feel bad today, but I'm just kind of I got no energy. So let's build a model. So I told you that I wanted to get back to work on the Gato submarine and hopefully save that from the rubbish bin. I've been gathering stuff together and getting prepared to do that. But in the meantime, I needed to fill a gap and I wanted to build a model. Now, you may remember just recently I went into my stash and I pulled out a model that I had started already, the Tom Daniel Paddy Wagon, and I took it out and I finished it up with you guys. And it came out great. We had a lot of fun and I'm really pleased with it. So I thought to myself, I know I've got another kit that I started and haven't finished. In fact, I've got two of them, and that is this here, the Bad Medicine by Monogram. It's a Tom Daniel design kit in 1/24th scale, and I have two of these at about the same level of build, and that's because I was trying to show my son the ropes of model building, and we were doing these together. Well, you know how it is. Life gets in the way, and sometimes you don't get to do some of the things you want to do. We never finished these. They just got put aside. Well, I decided I was going to finish mine for you today. So let's get this out of the box and get to work. Okay, so here it is, The Bad Medicine by Tom Daniel. A fun little vehicle. He kind of loosely fashioned this after like an old-fashioned medicine man wagon, so to speak. But to me, it's got a little bit more of like a voodoo vibe to it with the skeleton and stuff like that, and the purple, and I personally feel voodoo. Okay, that's just how I look at it. But either way, it's gonna be a fun build. So let's open the box and take a look and see just where I left myself. So we have the instructions. Thank goodness I didn't throw those away or do something stupid with those. I'm going to need to go over all of these again, just as if this was the first time, and make sure I understand the build so I can have a plan going forward. Little garbage, stuff I don't need. All right. So now let's take a look inside the box and see what we have. All right, we haven't even opened the chrome sprue. It's still sealed in the bag, and I guess I'm just going to leave it that way for now. Now, normally I would take the chrome off the kit. I think that kit chrome, this may sound stupid, but I think it feels out of scale. And by that I mean it just doesn't look right to me. So normally I like to take it all off and then put my own metallics on there. But in these Tom Daniel kits, barring a scene running right through the middle of a part, I think the chrome works pretty well because we are talking about show cars. So here's the body, and you can see it's already painted, not finished. I don't have clear coat on it or anything, but it's already painted. It's pretty much a one-piece deal except for the floor. So we'll put that aside. We can deal with that later. Here's some the interior, the seat for the skeleton, and the exhaust pipes, a few more pieces for the motor. And let's see here, here's the roof. I actually kind of like this kind of purple and this, well, purple, I guess. But I kind of like the way that looks. But that's not what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to go ahead and make the roof black, but I do kind of dig the way that looks a little bit. Here's our skeleton, ready to drive the bad medicine down the road. And look at this, a dead bottle of CA glue. Decals. Now, later I'm going to use the bad medicine decals, but I don't like the other ones, and I'm not going to use them. But, hey, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. All right, what else we got in here? Here's the rear drag slicks. And here's the front tires. And here's actually the motor. And as you can see, I've done a lot of work on the motor. Most of it's put together. It's not completely where it needs to be. And the intake already put together and painted, so it will match the body. And what else we got down here? Check this out. This is actually from the hood of my Challenger when I put in the hood pins. Do you know what kind of huevos it takes to take a hole saw to the hood of your brand new Challenger? Well, I did, and that's a part of my hood that I went ahead and hung on to. Anyhow, so yeah, you can see I'm not too far along. I threw some paint on the body and some of the basic parts of the motor. So now I'm just looking at where I had left off and looking at the instructions and trying to formulate a plan to move forward from here. Now, I've talked about this before. There are a couple schools of thought here. People like to paint most of the parts on the sprues, and I get that. There's a lot of convenience there in that you've got something to hold all the little parts, and you can paint them, and then you just got to touch up little spots. Personally, I like to build sub-assemblies as far as I can and paint them so I get this very unified finish. And that's why you'll see the motor going together as far as I can take it before I go ahead and put any paint on it. So I see that I never really finished putting on all the stuff on the engine, so I'm going to go ahead and use my sharp side cutters and nip away all the little parts. I'll get them cleaned up and glued onto the motor so that I can give it a paint job. Now, this is going to be one of those instances where I'll tell you to do as I say, not as I do, because I'm using a fairly crappy old blade in my knife just because I'm being lazy and stupid, and I'm not changing it out. I have a drawer full of razor blades, and I'm not changing it out. Now, fortunately, I'm going to get away with it this time, but this is the best way to cut the living tar out of yourself. All right, because what happens is you have to start to apply more force, and you have to work harder, and then there's a better chance that that knife will slip and get you. Okay, if you have a really, really nice sharp blade, it'll go through the part you're cleaning off really easily. It's much safer. So, listen, keep a nice fresh blade in your knife. Anyhow, I got the parts off the sprues, cleaned them all up, and now I'm just gluing those onto the engine. A lot of this engine is tucked away nicely where you'll never see it again, so all I really need to do is file where it's going to show. Like on the front part of the transmission here, there's going to be a seam line there that may be seen. So I'm going to file that down smooth before I go ahead and paint this. So I'm really in this just to have some fun and do a fun model build. So I'm not going to go crazy here. There's not going to be a lot of weathering and all this other stuff. But I do want to bring a few additional touches to really bring the model to life. So what I'm doing here is I'm using a small drill bit in my rotary tool, and I'm just drilling out the ends of the exhaust pipes. I'm not going to go too deep. I'm just going to drill a little bit and then widen out those holes a little, just so that the exhaust pipes look like they could actually put exhaust out of them. And while I'm in the mood and got my rotary tool out, I'm going to go ahead and drill out holes into the engine block so I can run some spark plug wires. So I'm drilling places for the spark plugs where they would be, and then I'll drill out the top of the distributor so I can run wires around the motor. I will tell you that having my little airbrush booth from Artie Station right here on my work desk, it takes up a chunk of my real estate, but it's really nice to be able to just reach over and lightly spray something small. And you know, I would never do a whole big airbrushing over here, but for little parts and components and stuff, it's really nice to have this right here. So I have this very thin yellow coated wire that's really perfect for spark plug wires, and I salvaged it from something. I don't remember exactly what, but it works great. And I've got 8 pieces, and I'm just going to glue them into the distributor, and then I'll position them around and put them into the holes I drilled into the engine block, and there you have it. I've got spark plug wires. So the motor is looking super cool, and I've got the exhaust pipes on here, the ones that I drilled out earlier, and I'm going to use just this rub and buff stuff and paint it on. It's an aluminum colored metallic buffing polish. I think it's actually a kind of a wax, but basically I'll just paint that on, let it dry, and then I'll just lightly buff it with the end of a Q-tip, and it should give a really nice, realistic metal look to these exhaust pipes. So we'll get that done, set the motor aside, and move on. So I've been having trouble with my cameras, okay? With the upgrade to the computer's system software and the new chip that I'm running off of, a lot of issues. And somehow that cost me the footage of putting on these 2 decals. But suffice it to say, they're just water slide decals. Wet them, slide them on, let them dry. You know, you're in business. So anyhow, they are on and they are thoroughly dry, and now I'm sealing up the entire body with my clear coat from Bright Vision. This should make this car look crazily amazing. Amazing? Amazingly? Yeah, you get the idea. So traveling back in time, I remember that we used some Testors rattle can paint for this, and it looked great. It's got a nice little bit of metallic sparkle to it and stuff. But man, when you get the clear coat on there and you're laying it down just right, and it's beautiful and glossy and wet looking, it just makes this metallic-y purple explode. This is going to look so nice. I'm very cranked about this right now. Okay, so I clear coated the body and the intakes for the top of the motor, and while those are drying, because I can't speed that up, I just have to wait. I'm going to keep myself busy over here with the motor. Now, you remember me telling you about how I normally would take the chrome off because I think it feels out of scale. Well, there is a way to make kit chrome look a little bit more realistic, and that's by using this little bit of wash. And this is just my Tamiya black panel liner, and I'm just kind of highlighting the nooks and crannies and bolts and narrows and grooves and slots and whatever else on this chrome, and it just kind of adds that extra look and makes it look so much more realistic. I mean, if you're going to use kit chrome, you really need to be doing this to make it look just so much better. Otherwise, it just looks, well, okay, it looks toyish. Okay, by putting the panel liner on it, we get rid of that. Okay, and it makes you look almost like you know what you're doing here. So, yeah, panel liner, definitely a must for kit chrome. Now, you might remember in my Rommel's Rod build video, I didn't do the skeleton. Well, I'm gonna do the skeleton for the bad medicine because, frankly, you almost have to. They molded the seat around the skeleton, and if you don't put it in, it's going to look all funky, and you're going to have a lot of work to remake the seat to look right. Besides that, I think it's just a cool little touch. So we're going to go ahead and build the skeleton. We're going to snip all the parts off with my beloved Tamiya side cutters, and we're going to get the skeleton glued together, and then we'll weather him down a little bit. So with all the parts of the skeleton snipped off, cleaned up, I'm now just going to glue them together, and then I'm going to run them over to the paint booth, and I'm going to actually lay down a little bit of a kind of a tannish white, okay? He should not be white at all. So he's going to get like a tannish white overall paint job, and then he's going to get some brown panel liner just to really make him pop. So let's go back to talking about chrome again. It seems to be the topic of the month here. Another reason I won't remove the chrome here is because there aren't really going to be any parts where there are seams running through it, ruining that cohesive chrome finish, okay? So I don't really need to remove this chrome. Yes, it's still a little bit too shiny, but that is also mitigated by the fact that these Tom Daniel cars are show cars. They're going to be spectacular and shiny and glossy and look fantastic and new and amazing. So I'm really not so afraid of kit chrome on a car like this. What I'm going to do here, though, is I'm going to scrape away the chrome everywhere I'm going to need to glue. You know, with this quick drying Tamiya extra thin cement, you can glue parts together with paint on them, and it'll just burn right through that paint and glue your part together. But with chrome, you still really do need to kind of get rid of that chrome to get parts to stick, or use CA, because that chrome will keep that glue from dissolving the plastics, which is really all it does, is it dissolves the plastics and lets them dry, melded back together. So yeah, when you're working the chrome, you're going to need to scrape it away. And for the most part, I scrape away painted areas too. I'm just saying, on the chrome, you really have to. So a little bit of weirdness with the drag slicks. Well, first of all, they're crinkled, and I'm not a fan of that. I wish kits that were going to include crinkled tires would offer two styles, crinkled and non-crinkled. And second, these are like hard plastic tires that you actually have to glue together, and that seems like a whole weird thing to me. And finally, if you're going to give me crinkled tires, give me a little prop to put up underneath the car, a la the Tarantula. The Tarantula has one, and so that the car can look like it's popping a wheelie. You know, give me that. You know, it doesn't, and it just, I don't know. I'm not a fan of these tires at all. They don't look terrible. And after I sand down the tread surface of them, they're going to look fine, but it's just a little weird to me. All right, so enough of that. Let's talk about the motor. It's almost done. I'm going to glue the air cleaner or the air scoop back onto the top of the motor, and it really looks pretty good. I've got the detail painting done, and I've worked on the chrome, and all in all, I say the motor looks fantastic. So for this process, I'm just using Tamiya thin cement. But, it got me to thinking that maybe I need to do a whole video just on cement choices for model builders. So if you're interested in something like that, why don't you put it down in the comment down below, and maybe I'll go ahead and just buy a demo kit that I can just knock together using the different glues and explain why I'm doing it and how I'm doing it, and, give you like a glue 101. Let me know if you're interested in that. So I really do sand the tread surface of almost all the tires I ever build just to get that correct look. This is more important on this kit than almost any I've seen before, because it's got a seam right in the middle from where you glue these together. So yeah, I've got like a 180 grit sandpaper, something like that, and I'm just going to sand all the way around, make sure you can't see the seam, and make sure I get a nice consistent scuff to it to add some realism. So we've got the wheels to go inside the tires, we've got the axles, the tie rods, we've got a lot of chrome to work on, so I'm going to get those all snipped off the sprue, cleaned up, and scrape away the chrome plating wherever I'm going to need to glue it, and we'll go ahead and get this thing wrapped up soon. So on this model, I have already used Tamiya extra thin cement. I've used Tamiya extra thin quick setting cement. I've used CA, and now I'm going to use Revell Contacta, and I'm going to put it on the mounting post on the inside of the body for the motor, so that I can then slide the motor in and get it into that glue spot. And this is going to take a little bit longer for it to dry. Okay, I've got more of an open time, so I can fidget with it and get it in just right, make sure it's all placed in there, and then I'm going to have to let it sit for a while and let it dry. But when you've got something that's going to take a little fidgeting and a little positioning and stuff like that, slow it down, get some Testors tube glue, use the Contacta, use something that's going to take a little bit of time to set up so you can get it right. Now, I don't want to try and dig into the body and the clear coat with a razor knife here for fear of doing damage, so instead of using model cement here, I'm going to use my Loctite Gel Control CA glue, and I'm going to put it around here up on this little indent where the fuel tank goes. So I'm just going to get some of the glue in there, and then I'll set that fuel tank in and let it dry. This just seemed to be the safest way for me to get it in, and this is such a prominent piece in such a prominent area of the build that I really didn't want to mess this up. So I told you I was going to paint the skeleton this kind of a tannish white, and that's what I'm doing over here right now. I moved over to the regular paint booth because in addition to painting the skeleton, I also need to paint the roof of the car. And so, I figured too much painting to do over where I normally work, so I've moved over here. And like I said, I'm just going to paint the skeleton and all the bone accessories this kind of a tannish color, because there are bone accessories for the drag chute and for the shifting lever and stuff like that. So let's get all those kind of a tannish white. And then what we'll do is we'll use magic black that I do with my die-cast restorations to paint the roof of the Bad Medicine. So with the skeleton nice and dry, I can use a little bit of brown panel liner from Tamiya, and I'm just going to go ahead and apply it all over my skeleton and buff it off as much as possible and just give him a kind of a splotchy, brownish, weathered look. So I guess I kind of lied when I said there's not going to be any weathering here. I meant really to the car. A skeleton without a little bit of weathering is just going to, honestly, it's going to look out of place and weird. So I almost have no choice but to do it here. But on the car, you know, again, we're talking about a show car. Those things are pristine. And so that's what I'm going to portray in this model. So once I had the front axle on and lined up, I put the wheels on one at a time, and you gotta kind of be careful here because you have to make sure that as the car sits in its normal stance, that the flat spot in the crinkled tire is going to be on the ground. That's why you got to do the front axle first, let it dry. Then I'm using one tire to hold up the one side of the car while I glue the other tire on. Once that's set, then I can take the other tire back off and glue it on. You know, that way all the tires are sitting straight and flush to the ground and the crinkles are in the right spot. And then I just make sure they're lined up and looking equal and everything is just perfect. And that's what I'm doing here. So once the tires were glued on, I found the biggest problem with this kit was my wheelie bar. It was down so far that the wheels would not touch the ground. So I ended up on the car, because I'd already glued it on the car, I had to torch it and bend it. And let me tell you something, that was very harrowing. I was not having a good time, but I got it bent right, and it ended up coming out great. And here I am just putting on some torsion bars, and everything is starting to look really cool. So for the seat, I painted it a nice semi-gloss black, and I love the way it goes in. It just kind of slides in from the top with the roof off, and there's a couple little notches. It just slide it in, glue it down, and you're set. And here I am getting ready to... Boney Maroney is about to get glued into his seat. So in he goes, and that's all she wrote there. So the kit does have a tricky thing in it, in that you glue the skeleton in sans arms, because what you want to do is you want to then put in the steering wheel and glue on his left arm to hold the steering wheel. So you kind of glue them in almost at the same time and make sure they line up and that his hand is on the steering wheel. And so for that, I'm going to use some CA glue. So once I kind of have everything positioned properly, it'll set up quickly. And then with the right arm, you got to do the same thing, but this time you're going to have the right arm holding the sickle shifter that's on the right side of the car. So yeah, it's a little fiddly. It's not the easiest part of this build ever, but it's doable, and it ends up looking pretty cool. You know, if I were to rate myself as a model builder, I would say I'm a good model builder. I wouldn't say I'm a great model builder by any stretch of the imagination, especially since I've had the opportunities to see some of the works of the truly great builders. But having said that, I do know a lot about some of the little techniques and things that are involved in building the kit. And hopefully, with these little simpler builds, I hope you're you're getting some extra knowledge out of them, because it seems like the perfect place to share different kinds of techniques and things that seem to work for me. At the end of the day, though, my philosophy is that model building is supposed to be about having fun and relaxing and a rewarding hobby. I think sometimes all of us, myself included, are guilty of putting too much stress into our builds that doesn't need to be there. You know, get in there and have fun. And if you're not having fun, walk away, rethink what you're doing, and come back and do it when you can have some fun. So the roof is one of the last things to go on the car, and fortunately it fits really, really well. So this doesn't end up being a problem. A thin little ribbon of contacta around the inside of this little lip, and then it sits right down on the top of the car very nicely. Put a little bit of weight on it to hold it down, but yeah, it goes on really, really well. And I gotta be honest, it's a little bit of a worry earlier on in the build that, you know, here I have all this stuff happening. What if the roof doesn't go on well? Well, you know, that could be a really big problem, but it ends up not, because the roof goes on perfectly. Okay, we got a lot of chrome since we put the motor in. We've got the front wheels, and we got the mags in the rear, and we got all the front axle parts and things like that. And all of that is getting treated with Tamiya black panel liner. Now, as to my friend the skull on the front of the car, what I'm doing here is I'm using the brown panel liner, but I didn't shake the bottle. And that left a lot of the pigment down on the bottom, so I was really left with a very light brown wash that I'm using on the skull at the front of the car. And I think that's just about all it needs. So we just have a last few little bits and pieces. We got the skull that goes on the back of the car. We have the drag chute, and we're just going to get those put onto my build. And hey, this thing is done. And just like that, there is my finished Bad Medicine model ready to go on the shelf. And I'm really happy with the way it looks. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Well, there you have it. My Tom Daniel designed Bad Medicine model in all its glory. I think it came out fantastic. I love the way it looks, and I'm so glad that I finished this build rather than just kind of kept it off to the side. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please give it a giant thumbs up, click subscribe, and don't forget to smash the notification bell so you never miss one of my model builds. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below because I love to hear from you guys. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Just remember, when you're feeling blue, try painting yourself a different color. Until next time, this is Paul from Fat Guy Productions saying, be good.